Hey everyone, welcome to Send It. This is episode 7. Today we're going to be talking about the 4th of July fireworks show at Hamlet, North Carolina. Apparently it was canceled due to some threats, and this happens to be Matt's hometown. I guess that being said, this is Matt. Matt works with us at Gallant Bullets, and if you want to give yourself a quick intro, just like who you are.
Eli pretty much covered the who part. Matt just moved out here to Salt Lake about 6 months ago from North Carolina. Avid shooter, getting into the long range game. More of a pistol shooter and shorter range rifle shooter, but came out here and there's so much open space that there's not in North Carolina to enjoy the long range shooting. So really looking forward to getting more into that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we have plenty of land to do it on, so it's great. So, Hamlet. Pretty small town?
Hamlet is a very small town, less than 10,000 people. But now for several years in a row, it has made the top 10 list in North Carolina of the most violent cities in the state as when you look at violent crimes per capita. Mm-hmm. So I believe 2 years ago, if you were a resident, lived within the city limits of Hamlet, you had a 1 in 3 chance of getting robbed through the course of the year.
That's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and you were saying that it's pretty much like a 4-block area that really is getting, I guess, it's like the hotbed of this violent activity, right? The robberies and all that are kind of spread out, but there's kind of this, I guess getting to the point of the article and the discussion, there's like a 4-block radius where the violent, violent crime occurs.
Yeah, that's correct. And If we'll post a link to the article as well, so you can go look at that on Fox News. It made it all the way up to the national level. It was such a big deal with the way that it happened. So last week there was a murder in the neighborhood. It was related to gang violence, and basically there were credible threats that were made focused on the 4th of July fireworks event that were going to be held there.
Like specifically stating the 4th of July.
Specifically stating that. So that's one of the largest events in the town every year. The other main event that they have there is the Seaboard Festival that takes place in October. But you have thousands of attendees that are going to be showing up at the city lake to watch fireworks there. And there's several different spots where people will congregate to sit and watch and enjoy the shows. So with the small police force in that town, there's no way that they could adequately cover the area to provide the type of security that they needed.
Okay. And I guess that makes sense, right? So what we wanted to kind of cover in our topic is give you a brief description of what happened, which Matt just kind of gave you the rundown. Apparently there was a murder on, was it June 20th, did they say? It was towards the end of June. It was about a week or week to 2 weeks ago. Then that was followed by credible threats specifically against the Independence Day celebrations. And then there was a subsequent cancellation of the event due to the city's inability or the county's inability to be able to protect the citizens at this event, right?
Yes.
And I think the heart of the discussion here, I think, is more of a societal issue. And for me, it's more, who we are as Americans and what society we live in now versus maybe where we would have been like, a couple generations ago or even a couple decades ago. Probably even a decade ago.
Yeah.
And for me, it turns more into an issue of, who we are as far as willing to take on. I don't know if you really want to say willing to take on danger, but willing to stand up for ourselves, right? For me, it's a matter of like who really has. It's not really the right, but who should be able to force you to stop celebrating our Independence Day? It's like the biggest celebration of our freedom and our independence in the nation, and you get some credible threats and they cancel it, right? Now, as Americans, right, like had we done that all the time, where would we be right now as a nation, right?
Exactly.
If we just canceled everything every time we got threatened.
We would have no major events anywhere in the United States ever. But going back to what we discussed earlier, given the political climate and most people's mentalities these days, the city made the right call.
Yeah, for society, right? Because had something happened, the city and the county would have been fried, right?
Oh, yeah.
If someone had gotten shot and they had credible threats and they didn't do what was necessary to stop people from being injured, then they would have been fried. And that's kind of what brings it back to a societal thing for me, right? Legally, yes, they did what's right. Morally, probably, right? They should have at least alerted the citizens.
Yes.
But what I believe is, as far as the societal issue is, as Americans, we should be wanting to be aware of the threats made on us, and then basically say, "Fuck you, I'm going anyways. And if you come here to harm me, I'm going to kill you." Right? Like, as a society, we've come to the point where now it's the government is responsible for protecting us, whereas before it was, you think back generations, and I think we covered this in a topic with Mike a few episodes ago, the history of the police force. Back in, like let's say the Wild West or that era, Americans were responsible for defending themselves, and the police force largely came and tried to arrest the people that had already done the crimes, right? The police force was not a preventative force. It was a reactive force that came and swept up afterwards, right? So Americans were largely responsible for their own defense. Mm-hmm. And now we've gotten to the point where not only are the majority of Americans not wanting to be responsible for their own defense, but they also want to completely hold somebody else completely accountable for it. And that's where you get to this point, where now that we have a position in our country, or a societal stance, that the city is responsible for keeping me safe. And if I'm not safe, I'm going to sue the city. Rather than saying, the city should be keeping their ears out, and if something happens, or they should let me know that something might happen. I can make the choice of whether I go or not, because I'm a fucking adult, and I can decide for myself if I want to take on that risk or not. But even beyond that, they're going to do their best, right? But we, as everyone in our community, should be also defending our community, keeping each other safe, right? And I feel like that should be the response, I guess, that I'd look at as an American or want to see. And that's why I think it's a societal issue, right?
Yeah, and if we look back, just think about how our founding fathers would have looked at something like this.
Right.
They would have banded together, showed up, and waited. That's my opinion on the matter. But to touch on something you said, I believe a lot of people aren't willing to take the responsibility for their safety. But even furthermore, there's quite a few people that probably would if they were capable, but they don't have the knowledge, the tools, or the skills to do so. And that does fall back on the person, because there's plenty of resources. You can always go out and better yourself. You can take a class. You can read.
Accountability, right?
Yeah. So it's just we've reached a point in society where people can win in these situations and intimidate entire, large sections of the population.
And I think it gets to a certain point, and here's the crux of why I wholeheartedly disagree with canceling events because of threats. Obviously, since the event was canceled, you don't really know how credible it was. You can call them credible threats, right? There are credible threats that don't materialize, right? But since the event was canceled, we actually don't know if they were legitimate threats, if they were actually going to follow through, right? Mm-hmm. So the crux of the whole discussion for me and what causes issue is, and this goes back to my service in Afghanistan, we used to listen to these guys on our radios all the time talking about exactly what we were doing, where we were, how many people we had, how many trucks we had, and then they just throw out, oh, we're going to ambush them in 15 minutes, or hey, we're going to hit this first truck with an RPG. And they just kind of do that, and they'd see if we react or what we do, right? Now, if we reacted to those threats, and for us, those would be credible threats because we already know they know exactly who we are and where they are because they're talking about us. But had we stopped or deviated from our plan every time we had a credible threat, we'd get nothing done, right? And I think the scary part about that is if you take that mentality where you can either push through this thing, and if they come to do what they say they're going to do, you kick their face in. So if we get to the point where we're canceling everything because of these credible threats, you're going to get to the point where now other people are going to make quote-unquote credible threats where their whole intent is to try and stop things from happening when they don't really actually have the intent of killing people. They just want to make sure that they make a credible enough threat to stop things from happening. And then you get to the point where you're either going to start crippling our society and our celebrations as a society, or we've got to stand up and say, okay, we're going to do this anyways, and we're going to find out if it's real or not, and if it's real, we're going to kill everyone involved, right, or hold them accountable. And that's kind of what scares me about this, is I get why they did what they did. I'm not going to say they shouldn't have. I wasn't there. You know, I'm not going to criticize them and say, no, absolutely not, you should have gone through with it, because I don't know. But what scares me about it is that we've now made that first step. It's kind of like, you know, negotiating with terrorists. We don't negotiate with terrorists until President Obama traded a bunch of terrorists for our, you know, I won't go into that, but now we have traded with terrorists, and now they know that if they hold us long enough, maybe one of our presidents will will trade us for them.
Well, one of the scary things for me is, you know, being from the area, I do have quite a few friends that are in the law enforcement field there. So just a little background on the area. The entire county has a population of around 40,000 people, fairly small area. And for that entire county, there are 2 fireworks celebrations now on the 4th of July. So by canceling one of these 2 celebrations, you have now focused the crowd that would have been split between the 2 into one area, and you've basically diluted the police presence there, because they've already scheduled out how many officers they're going to have there, and I'm sure they probably went crazy and tried to get as many in as they could from as many different law enforcement agencies as possible. Mm-hmm. But you crammed even more people into an already crowded area and created an even bigger security concern. So if they had made these threats as a diversion to possibly cancel one event, funnel more people into the second event, if something had happened there, it would have been even worse.
Right. So yeah, I think that's kind of, it goes into tactics, right? And it goes into just us as a society, what we're willing to accept. And I think one of the things that needs to change is, in order to stand up to people like this, you have to be willing to accept the consequences if you take the risk and you fail, right? Meaning, if you take the risk and somebody ends up being killed, you have to realize that, I think as Americans, we used to feel like, hey, we did what we could, we tried to fight them, we're not going to let anyone make us back down. You know, yes, it sucks that someone died, but we did the best we could, and we killed everyone, or we arrested everyone that was involved, right? So you made a stance and showed these people that they can't do it. So I think we're going to get up there and we're going to wrap this up. I think the bottom line for us is it puts us in a gray water. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode about this, kind of go into the more details. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say, what your feelings are on the topic, and counterpoints to what we said. Go ahead and comment on our website or any of the other platforms that we post these videos, and we'll do our best to comment back and have a discussion with you guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.